Okay. So we've looked at the ethical decision-making model, a model that explains, that describes the factors that influence organizations' way of the organization's intention and behavior in ethical decision-making. So that model, um, it says here that an ethical decision making model, that decision making model that we've seen, does not help in determining if a business decision is right or wrong. Okay, so that model is not about looking at whether decisions are ethical or not ethical, but it is more intended to provide insights about ethical decision making in businesses. It's more about looking at the way organizations make decisions. So it's not looking at whether the decisions are right decisions or wrong decisions, because business ethics involves value judgments and collective agreement about acceptable patterns of behavior. So gaining an understanding of the factors that make up ethical decisions help in differentiating between an ethical issue and a dilemma. Okay. So um, instead, in order to ensure or to look at whether an organization is making a right decision or a wrong decision, we need to be looking at the normative consideration in ethical decision making, which some sort of prescribes the right things to do for an organization. Okay, so normative approaches is about how organizational decision makers should approach an issue. So it is a prescription. It is it is an advice. Okay, it is an advice. It is a prescription. It tells about how the organization should approach an issue, rather than just describing the way that they approach an issue. So it is different from the descriptive approach, which is the one the framework we've shown earlier. Um, most organizations develop a set of core values to provide enduring beliefs about appropriate conduct within the firm. Okay, so um, if for normative approach, the things that will drive the organization to perform ethical decision making is their core values, and what is their instrumental concern. Okay, so um, organizations um, will, when they address ethical issues, they will be more concerned about their instrumental concern. Their The way they decide will be influenced by their instrumental concern, such in examples of instrumental concern is the focus on positive outcomes, um, focus on firm profitability, focusing on benefits to society. And the foundation of normative values is institutions. Okay, so is in this the theory says that organizations operate according to taken for granted institutional norms and rules. Okay, so organizations operate, the way they operate is largely influenced by institutional norms and rules. Okay, so institutional can be governments, religion, or educations. Okay, these are examples of institutions, and when an organization is uh, is a member of such organization or such institutions, then they will be highly influenced by the values, norms, and conventions of that institution. Um, so, if, for example, if an uh, organization the members of an organization has a certain level of education, their education uh, is shaped through a certain way, then the organization will be influenced to make decision based on that particular education uh, perspective. Industry competition is determined by barriers to entry into the industry. Okay. um, Available substitutes for the products produced by the industry rivals, the power of the industry rivals over their customers, and the power of the industry rivals suppliers over other rivals. Okay, so organizations also follow their industry. So industry itself is also can be considered as an institution. So an organization that belongs to a certain industry will usually make ethical decisions based on what is acceptable in the industry practice. That is based on the institutional theory. And some of the industrial competition is with regards to barriers to entry, available substitutes, the power of industry rivals over their customers, and the power of industry rival suppliers over other rivals. Okay, so implementing principles and core values in ethical business decision making. One A group of scholars or some researchers have come up with what is called as the veil of ignorance, a thought experiment that examined how individuals would formulate principles if they did not know what their future position in society would be. Okay, so the veil of ignorance is an experiment where uh, uh, if all individuals are not bound by any principles or any institutions, what would be their principles? What would be principles common among them? Okay, so based on the veil of ignorance, two main principles that comes up that can be considered as um, acceptable by all community. Okay, the first one is equality principle. The secondly is difference principle. In the equality principle, each person has basic rights that are compatible to the basic liberties to others of others. Okay, so each person has some basic rights that are compatible to the basic liberties of others. The second principle, the difference principle, states that economic and social equalities or inequalities should be arranged to provide the most benefit to the least advantaged members of society. So, even though we have the equality principle, but the difference principle is also accepted by most, where any rearrangements of the economic equalities or inequalities should take into consideration and should give the most benefit to the least advantaged members of the society. So given the um, given the situation where there are people who are disadvantaged, the members of the society, the least advantaged members of the society, then more of the economic resources should be channeled towards the people who are at the least advantaged. Okay, so this is a principle that is quite agreeable, is universally agreeable. Okay, and then with these two main principles, companies will convert them into core values that they adopt in their organization. Okay, so generally speaking, we have principles that are universally accepted, and companies will adopt these principles and make it as their core values. Okay, and which will provide the abstract ideals and operate in a sustainable manner. So these are examples of the core values. Such core values include operate in a sustainable manner, collaborate and teamwork, avoid bribery, provide a blueprint into firm's goals, ethical decision making. These are examples of core values that companies um, may decide on. Okay, so this slide is showing the differences in the principles and between principles and value. So principles are widely accepted, um, whereas values are more subjective and related to choice. So organizations will choose which value that they think is suitable for the organization. Um, Principles will be the guiding factor that helps organizations shape their values. Principles will be the guiding factors of creating values, whereas values is used to develop the norms. Um, Principles establishes pervasive boundaries for behavior, and values provides guidance to organizations. And usually, principles are valued across cultures, but values differ across cultures and firms. So different cultures and different firms may have different sets of values, but principles are generally accepted across cultures. Examples given in the blue boxes, for example, the principles: we will obey all relevant laws in the country in which we do business. So that is an acceptable principles um, of a business in the industry. And examples of values is: we will encourage teamwork and collaboration to come up with the best solutions. Because some organizations work better when they make decisions via teamwork and collaboration. Some organizations will may require more of independent work, independent decision making among the members. Okay, next we try to understand ethical decision making through the framework that we've seen. Okay, so as a summary, when we try to understand the decision making processes of organizations when facing with ethical dilemma or issues, we can generally say that top level support is very instrumental. It is one of the biggest factor um, in helping employees engage in their personal approaches to ethical decision making. So it explains, or top level support becomes a big factor that explains how organizations represented by the employees make decisions when facing with ethical issues. But the normative perspective uh, shows, or the ideal goals to which organizations should aspire, including the basic um, uh, principles that people generally accept, that organizations will form into values and their norms and rules. And then knowledge about ethical decision making helps in making good decisions.